The elder women called her Nolulilili, the song maid, for she would be among them long ago when she was a little girl, when they were in their youth, fetching water at the river. Her voice was the highest and sweetest, as they all sang to Lebadi, Hoana, Ngoabe, Lisebo and Buang, the heroes and heroines who fetched the sun in the morning from over the mountains. But to her Lord Father, she was Ninua, the daughter of Uma-Undar. She never came back with the elder women when they returned, but remained at the river on her own. Soon she took up another name, one that the river birds gave to her, Mbali Nolanga, the river daughter. But to her Lord Father, she was Khosanagazi Ninua, the royal daughter of Uma-Undar. Ninua has an older sister named Noura, who goes by her marriage name to the Siro-Mihuas. It has been a year since she left home for the north, and news just came that she gave birth to a son. But to her Lord Father, Noura was still the daughter of Uma-Undar, and will always be. For Khosi Duma Uma-Undar was a proud man, one who held the prize of his two daughters up in his chest. The marriage negotiations had been difficult enough for Ninua's older sister to join hands with the Siro-Mihuas. As for hers, it would take a miracle, one not hope itself would bet on. Moungi is the fifth son of the house of Thongi-Serougii, the enemy of your father and his fathers before him. These words would revisit Ninua at the end of every sweet thought she had about her secret lover, most often in the middle of her daydreams. She could hear her father revolting against the idea at first mentioning, and her mother taking his side as she always did. For 3 seasons since the sun rose on Libadi's peak, Ninua has kept the secret safe with her. But now the secret was growing inside her, a seed slowly flowering in her womb, with little fists and itchy feet and a little heart of its own, soon due to claim its place in the world. She was awake long before she opened her eyes. How her mother had spotted or smelled the fever out of her, Ninua had no idea. Must be that Nimba who reported me to her, she thought, ruining the day she chose Nimba for a headmate. As a matter of fact, Ninua had been pretending to be asleep since the morning, hoping her mother would eventually leave the Nawa, leave her to be with the other girls at last. But her mother had stuck on, and for some reason none of the girls had entered the heart since. It was going to be her and her mother, and it was going to take all night if she continued burying herself in fake sleep. How long have I been asleep? She finally opened her eyes, asking her mother, who sat by the bedside tending to her. 2 mornings Ngoabe gave Masaya the sun, Nineveh answered her, dipping a piece of cloth on the bowl of water next to her, and again placing it on Ninua's brow. 2 days. 2 days since I was last at the river. Moungi must think I finally abandoned him, Ninua thought quietly. Nineveh was the Khosikati of House Uma-Undar and the mother of her only two daughters with Khosi Duma. An unqualified Ongome in her days, she descended from the Nodlo family, one of the great houses this side of the river. When the time for her last rite of passage came, she hung up her Invula Silapa, a healer's shawl, and eloped with Duma Uma-Undar. Though she never looked back, she never lost her skill at healing minor illnesses. But this doesn't look like a minor illness, she told her daughter, glancing at Ninua with curious eyes. Each time she placed the cloth on her, it was cooler and soothing, for Ninua had picked up a fever that made her sweat all over her body. It is nothing, Mama, Ninua tried to protest. It's just a foul breath. Nice try, Oami. You are not going anywhere until Mangwe has had a look at you, said her mother, feeling her forehead with the back of her palm. Mangwe is away not looking after Noura. How? If he has to travel another day while I wait on this bed, then I will have real cause to be sick, stuck here waiting. You are sick, sweet child. Have been since the morning before yesterday. And why, Mangwe? You could ask Ndwandwe or any of the seers around, argued Ninua suddenly. Her mother stopped for a moment and stole an uneasy glance at her. Ninua returned the glance the second Ninua's eyes moved away, and when she looked back at her, she shifted uncomfortably. A long-held smile was trying to disguise itself in her mother, a very knowing smile. She is good at this game, eh? Ninua admitted to herself, fearing that her secret has been discovered at last. For Mangwe was the only healer who specialized in childbirth this side of the river. He had left the river valley to attend Noura, who lived with her in-laws in Sidiba, the northern stronghold of the Siromihuas. The only reason Mangwe would return to the valley in such a haste is the same reason he left it, and both mother and daughter knew it as they exchanged silent glances this summer afternoon. You are not going anywhere until Mangwe has had a look at you, Khosikati Nineveh repeated herself, this time in a more commanding tone while she continued caressing her daughter. Silence passed. Ninua kept her mouth shut and decided to play along. She hoped her condition was all her mother suspected and expected a flood of questions coming her way. But Nineveh carried on quietly too, stealing at her from the corner of her grey eyes. She towered above her as if she was some goddess, her shoulders and wide bosom dominating her queenly stature, on which her purple dress rubbed over with strips of white pearls. She had an elongated neck that all the women of the valley were exquisitely common of, which Ninua also inherited from her among other things. Her neck was covered with 15 rings of thin silver that shimmered beneath her perfect jawline. Iziqolo, the neck rings Bahura women wear when they come of age. Brass ones were for an unmarried girl, silver for a married woman. The more the number of rings on her neck, the older and higher the woman was worth. For Nineveh was still a glowing beauty even in her 40s, the original gene of her daughters, if it weren't for her grey eyes and greying hair that was bundled with the ituku that she wore for a headscarf. Soon, Ninua searched for other signs that may give her a clue what her mother has been up to. Not even in her sleep did she once breathe a word about Moungi, nor a slip of the tongue to Nimba, her childhood friend who shared her Nawa. As for her secret meetings with Moungi, no one had knowledge about her movements. Her birds always guarded her from eyes that might lurk behind her back each time she went down to the river. That leaves us with old dear Langa, she thought then. Has she finally grown weary of my sweet voice? No, Langa was her godmother, and she was her goddaughter, the river daughter, Mbali Langa. Old dear Langa would never betray Ninua. Again, that brings us back to my other mother, my sweet, cunning mother. And so Ninua gathered her guts again and faced Nineveh, Khosanagazi to Khosigadi, lioness to lioness, princess versus queen. Come on, Mama, she began, sitting up straight on the bedside. It is obvious why you would call the only healer from Guabeleto to come and see me. We both have questions, you and I. It's time we stop pretending and talk like grown-ups. Yeah, well, we both have questions, but you have all the answers, Mtanam, said Nineveh, putting down the healing cloth and folding her arms. What answers? Asked Ninua. Do you want to know who the idiot I fucked is? How father will be proud of me at last? A clap broke in the air. Nineveh had slapped her daughter on the cheek. She always wanted to get at her father, did Ninua, having grown up resenting the Khosi with every reason she could find. Duma was overtly proud and ruled his stronghold with iron hands. His pride over Ninua and her sister directly affected her standing with their people, denying her the simplicities that her peers enjoyed growing up, a life outside of being revered and reserved in the name of royalty. She was the jewel that every girl envied and every boy feared to approach. It was as if she lived in a glass house and watched others live for the simple joys of life. All of the friendships and lovely that once came her way had a tag on them, the idea of her as her father's daughter in the place of who she was without her royal title. When the year turns to Dinkwe and Lisebo's days, the young women of the house would hold Lihlumile, a dance festival and a beauty contest where the young men come together to compete for the most beautiful girl in the stronghold. Admiration was hailed with songs, and each girl would dance very daringly to the rhythm of drums as a tribute to her beauty and quality. In that display of virtue of youth and passion with desire, the girl attracted only the bravest and boldest young man who could carve a place in her heart. As the years went by, Ninua and her sister stopped participating at the festival of Lihlumile because none of the young men could hope to marry any of them. No matter how brave and handsome the man looked, her father's bride price was beyond their families to satisfy. Rather than chasing a fantasy that will never bear fruit, the young men spent their efforts on the other young women and avoided the royal sisters. For the young man, the dance was only the beginning. At the end of his conquest, the man would have fought other bulls in the kraal, one feat after another, crawled and prowled on his knees and arms through mud and dust before he was finally crowned. All of that for what? Melons and bums, rock and shake, and the figure of Nindeisha, quietly thought Ninua now, nursing the pain of her mother's slapping. The words she just thought of were from a song made by strangers who came to visit Muma, invited by her father to see the dance festival. When they left the shores of Lesira, their impression of Bahura women's large breasts, thin waists and thick buttocks and thighs stirred the insatiable hunger of scepter kings and landlords, back in the lands where they came. Nindaisha is the name of a sea goddess from Nisi Man, the Isle of Thousand Islands, once explained her father when Ninua was younger. Years later, now in her enlightened days, Ninua learned that her father kept his own Nindaishas right here in his house, his very own flesh and blood. She learned the pain of being owned by a father whose heart was made of greed. She was no sweet child, sweet as she looked on her noble face. It was known that Bahura women were beautiful, but the most beautiful of them were not merely worn through mud and dust. The most beautiful of them were not some neighborhood daughter worth 12 cows and a goat to spare her mother. The most beautiful were worn through blood, in the battlefield of warriors, not boys. A story goes among travelers how once upon a time ago a slave girl child from the land of the rising sun became the most powerful queen in the ancient realm of the Scepter Kings. She had come to the west all the way from the very soil of Ninua's ancestors and brought the rise and fall of 3 mighty kings. It is queens that bring the rise and fall of great houses, Ninua's father used to say when she was younger, recalling Lesira's own vicious wars here at home that were fought in the name of its daughters. The last time such a conquest took place was when Moungi Thongi-Serougii marched beyond the furthest north and came back with Nonyeza by the river. If father knew Nonyeza would marry the very man I fell in love with, he might have marched to the battle if only to kill Nonyeza with his own bare hands and stop the seed of doom before it was planted into fate. Some days Ninua thinks it's a curse, all of it. A curse that began when she ignored her mother's warnings about her friends of the river. Curse or not, her father was always the one to blame because of the prison walls he built around her and her sister at home. The day he decided to free Noura, it was only to draw her sister into another prison away from home. A marriage to the Siramihuas, which for her father was only a means to forge power relations between the Uma-Undars and the Siramihua family of the far north. Not I, Ninua thought to herself now. I will not be someone's spoils of war. I will marry the man I love, on the terms of my own heart. Here she still sat before her mother, renewing her vow silently while words and images passed in her mind. Kgosigadi Nineveh did not say a word after disciplining her daughter, but watched her as if her mind was laid bare for her to read. Yes, after all, she was half a seer, was Ninua Uma-Undar. Nothing missed her sight that her daughter did in the dark. Her and that fiend Langa, back at the river banks, that Ninua called her river mother. I hope that was for your own disappointment in me, not my insult at father, said Ninua at length. Because as far as things appear to be, father is getting what he deserves. And how are things appearing, do tell, Mtanami, her mother asked. Come on, that Udzio of mine looks newly filled with fresh water, and it didn't fill itself. I know you went to the river and saw him. Ninua gestured at her water pot by the wall. Nimba filled your Udzio and reported everything she saw to you, as she always does, Ninua interjected her mother, saying. But you didn't believe her, so you went on your own to see it for yourself, and so you did. What could be that important enough to draw you out of your moor? Why spend the whole day next to your daughter, waiting for her to wake up so you can ask her how she is feeling? I see you've learned to play this dance, Mtanam, said Nineveh, admitting the accusation. Good. because you are going to need it very soon. Your father will be home in 2 days' time. I would best prepare if I was you, or better yet, consult Ongomengome and forget what has happened. You cold-hearted whore! Yes, cold is truth. Do you think you can sway your father to make peace with those monsters over the river? If I know my husband well, he would let you keep the little bastard, only to kill it after bed out in the open for all the Thongi-Serougis to see. It will be a slice of sweet revenge. Then I will not sway him. I will give him a war. Another slap followed. Watch where your tongue goes. You know nothing of war, ndodanagazi yami. But Ninua ignored the slap and fired on. I know father swore to me long ago that it would take a war to win his daughters. When he comes back, I shall ask him in his face, see if he still has any guts left to fight. Or is he going to marry me, like he did Noura, to some king over the sea? Pass me to the cock he has been licking all this time. It was not a slap this time around. It was a rain of fists, and Ninua had anticipated it with her own anger that built up from the previous slapping. They fought fiercely, one lioness against the other. The bowl of river water went upside down, the cloth torn apart. Soon the white pelts on Niniva's dress and headscarf had come off, scattered on the floor. Ninua wore nothing on, having been in bed naked. By the time Nineveh arrived, the Udziwo was also down on its side, and the water spilled everywhere. But by the time Khosuduma arrives home, there won't be a single sign of what just happened. Hate and love were served brewed together at the Uma-Undars, as it was with many Bahura families. With the women, it was the insults. With the men, spears. Both were just as sharp. Both were wont of drawing blood. The sun had almost touched Masaya's crown. Whatever Nimba did to bring mother and daughter to calm down was only going to be short peace. They had to unlock horns before the man of the house returned, because as the saying goes, eyabasikati ayivukeli. The woman's grudges don't see the next morning. Soon they were alone again, speaking with less audible but sharp voices. You will take my side, Mama. Ninua handed a pearl to her mother, one after the last. You will make sure there is no need for father to take this matter to his stupid elders' council. Else father will know what you and uncle did, and the council will have more than one matter to discuss. This time Nineveh didn't raise her hand. She concealed her shock to herself and carried on sewing the pearl onto the strip. She twisted and wove, and slowly the torn parts of her dress began to disappear. What lies has that river witch been telling you about my marriage? She asked her daughter. And when Ninua was reluctant to answer, she went on and spoke at length. You are brave, child, but only the big girls can play that game. You will support my plea, her daughter insisted. Your father does not even listen to me. Once he did. Once you drove the beast mad and finished him with a wink of your eye. Surely you can bring those knights back? If I could, he would be at home now as we speak. Then make him swallow his own ways, huh? Remember, it is queens that bring the rise and fall of great houses. Isn't that what he used to say? "And which house do you want to see rise? Which one do you want to see fall? I do wonder, mtanam," Nineveh cautioned by way of asking, pausing her sewing and facing Ninua. The hour was turning dimmer as the sun sank behind Masaya's crown in the west. "Do not come between the men and their old scores, my child," she further warned her daughter. "Only blood can settle those, not queens." "Then we shall put it to the test, dear old mother," said Ninua, peering into the distances of her mind. The golden light was gone, and evening had come. "We will see if his words were true, once and for all." When her mother left her bedside and stooped before the door of her nawa, Ninua called out to her before she could exit. "I am going to meet Moungi at the river tonight," she said. "I want no eyes on my tail till dawn. Otherwise, father will know the things he should have known from the beginning."